Right, so I've got a update for the new gesture-based special abilities. So a couple weeks ago I released what would be now version 1, and I actually had a ton of stuff in it, but there was a small glitch that was reported, and there was as I was kind of investigating that, it actually opened like a whole new world of possibilities. So while fixing that, I also incorporated a bunch of new stuff. So I'm going to try to do videos on all of it, but I don't know if I'll get them all done in short time, but they will be getting added. But there's going to be so much more now, even more we can do with V2 of the gesture-based special abilities. I'm going to try to do separate videos for some of the ideas, but there's really limitless on what you can do. So let's go take a look at this. So these are all going to fall under the multi-phase blade builder. You'll see the new gesture-based special abilities here. If you didn't watch the original V1 video, that kind of covers a lot of the intro, so I'm not going to necessarily repeat that, but I am going to show you what's changed from V1 and then also how to go about some of these concepts. So we'll go in for a main blade build. This is your enhancement screen. We're going to choose our multi-phase gesture-based special abilities. This will always pop up if you don't have a trigger on a style. It's a requirement, so this is just letting you know there. We're going to talk about that in a second. But when you get these warnings, just read them. I put them there typically to just let you know, hey, the library is waiting for you to take some action. Or in some cases, you've selected something that conflicts with another selection. So that's the reason these pop up. They're written there to help you out. But so let's take a look. So what I want to do here is I'm going to build a multi-phase blade that uses, again, these new gesture special abilities to kind of build up. I want to build up this energy in my saber, and then I want to have a way to release it. So the idea with the gesture-based multi-phase and multi-phase in general is you go from one style to the next or you can go, jump around. And then with special abilities, they all use the alt font. So the visual effect on the blade is also going to be corresponding to an alt font, which you can do changes to the audio, so the hum, the swing, etc. There's separate videos on phases and alt fonts. If you don't know how to set them up, definitely watch. They're at the top of the library too, so I'm not going to spend too much time on that. But what I do want to do is show this kind of concept. So what we're going to do first of all is each phase will have a trigger, which is what allows you to get to that phase. In case of everything, style 0, which is default, also has a revert. So all your other phases will always try to revert to 0 based on some trigger. Phase 1 allowed for you to choose a trigger for all phases. V2 of the gesture-based special abilities have actually made it so you can do an independent revert. So I'm going to use that for this setup. What that means is that every phase can have its own way to revert to 0 or default. So I'm going to kind of walk through some of this quickly, but I'll explain as I go. All right, so I want to set up, I'm going to make the second phase kind of a rolling pulse. And then some of these selections I've kind of already messed with. I want to change this color. I'm going to change my blue a little bit. So what I've got for style 0 is using base color, which is regular blue. Style 1 is going to be the Dodger blue, so it's a little bit brighter blue, although they're really close when you see them in person. And then I have to choose this phase trigger. What I want to do is I want to have this be a point up and hold. And that was in the previous video. You can set your hold time, but you'll see here now I have a phase revert trigger. So because I set independent up here on phase 0, how I revert to phase 0, I can set independently on each of the subsequent phases. So for this one, I'm going to do clash lockup twice. All right. Now I want to add another phase on top of this. So I want to build up. So the first one's kind of a rolling pulse. Let's do an unstable pulse here. Color-wise, let's go a little brighter. So I'm going to go into the deep sky blue. And then I have to set a trigger for this one. So now what's going to happen when you're setting up these gesture-based special abilities is you cannot normally use the same trigger for multiple special abilities for obvious reasons. But V2 introduces this idea of incrementing. So if I select full-time means always active. We'll talk about isolated in a different video because that kind of has its own things with it. But we're going to go incremented. Now, what's going to happen is it's going to, in order for incremented to work, incremented is kind of a special use. The library is going to override some of these selections if they don't jive. So I'm going to kind of cover some of these as I can, but I have to choose a trigger first. So I've set incremented here for phase 2. What incremented means, if you select it, is that phase 2 can only trigger if phase 1 is currently active. So if you're in default or if you're in any other phase, this phase that's set for incremented cannot be triggered unless you're in the one that precedes it. So that's the idea of incrementing, hence the name. But let's go choose a trigger. Now I can choose point up and hold again. Now, when we use the same phase, the only time you can use it is in incrementing, and it also requires some additional setup, which the library is going to try to help you with. In order to increment, the phase that precedes it also has to be incremented. The reason for this, full time in the controls lets you jump into that phase at any point in time from any other phase. That's great if you have different triggers. If you have the same trigger, it doesn't work, because that means when I jump from phase 1 to phase 2 can actually jump back to phase 1 because their triggers are the same. So in order to use the same trigger in multiple phases, they have to all be incremented. They also have to be built in order of each other, which also makes sense for increment. So I can't like choose phase 1, point up and hold, and then phase 4, point up and hold. The library won't allow it, and also doesn't allow for what needs to happen in the style code to be assembled. So you're always going to want to stick these guys together if you're trying to use incremented, which is what we're doing here. But so now I can do point up and hold. Now the other piece of this, the library is going to give me a warning. Holding, any kind of hold, so point up and hold parallel, point down and hold, blah, blah, blah. Any of these that use a holding time, you need to allow at least 3,000 milliseconds, 3 seconds between one phase to the next. When we're using the same trigger, we also have to allow for that trigger to first of all execute, but secondly for the alt font to make the change over. And that's something that happens in the OS. So in testing, less than 3 seconds, there was too much overlap, and sometimes it would skip a phase, and other times it could actually get the animation on the blade locked up. So 3 seconds is the minimum that the library is going to allow. You can do more. If you want it to be, a bigger gap, that makes it a little easier for you to call upon these things, you can. But the minimum the library is going to allow for any of the hold gestures is a 3 second between phase, blah, 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 to the next. So it's going to automatically, it says the tool is updated to time automatically. It's going to automatically add 3,000 milliseconds to the previous phase's trigger to make sure that this operates correctly. So you're going to get this every time you add an incremented phase that uses the same thing. I want to let you know that I'm changing the time on you, and I also want to make sure that it happens. So that's why this warning will keep popping up on you, but it's there to help you. And then the other piece of it that happens behind the scenes is in order to properly increment, it will also increment the phase that precedes it. So this used to say full time, but it will now say incremented because of what I explained earlier. If you have a full-time active trigger, and then the next one is incremented, or any of them, the next one is incremented, you could slip back accidentally, and or it can cause a conflict. So we prevent that. But so now this one, if I hold it for 6 seconds, pointed up, I will go into phase 2. And then I'm going to set this, I'm purposefully using the same things over because I want to show how this all comes together. I'm going to also set a clash lockup, but for this one I'm going to do 3 times. And then I want to go one more phase. I'm going to choose unstable rage. And then I want this one to actually go silver on me. And then I'm going to set, and just for those of you who aren't familiar with the terminology, the alt color 3 is tied here. By changing it here, it changes it. You can also set fixed colors or choose other. Any of these are arguments within edit mode, so they can be edited on the blade or via ProffieOS Workbench. If you just want a specific color only, you would use fixed color. The library assumes you want to be able to edit the color, so that's what it always does. So when you see me changing a color up here, it's because it's being called off over here. So alt color 2 is on this phase, that's set here, etc., etc. So alt color 3 is here. So by changing it here, that's what's changing this blade. And we're going to set, again, I want to increment from the one before it. I'm going to go to incremented, and then I need to set a trigger. I'm going to set point up and hold. If I didn't choose incremented first, so say this was full time, it would gray out point up and hold, so you wouldn't be able to set it. So you always have to set the increment first, and then I can go point up and hold, and then again it added 3 seconds on top of the other one. And then again we're going to go clash lockup, and then for this one I'm going to set 5, just to make it more important. Now the reverts can be the same or different, and they can be same thing. Like I can have multiple different ways to revert from each phase. I can have different timings, different X times, etc. I'm just doing this on purpose. All of this you can play around with. But the revert being independent, which is what we talked about earlier, means that if I'm in this phase to revert, I have to do this. If I'm in this phase, I have to do this. If I'm in this phase, I have to do this. We also we always revert to 0. There's a few reasons for that, because of how the gestures are doing, but also how the OS keeps track of what you're trying to have happen. So you're always going to go, if you've, and this goes with any case, if you're setting a revert, the revert is always going to be to 0. If you have different phases you want to get to, those would be called with their triggers. And with incrementing, if we added another style and we wanted to call it, we could. But I'm only focusing on incrementing now. So I'll do some other videos on some of these other combos. All right, so now what we've got is I've got a regular blue rotoscope blade that starts out. When I point up and hold for 3 seconds, I've got a rolling pulse in Dodger blue. That'll come active. That's going to stay active unless I clash twice. Or if I point up and hold for 6 seconds, I'm going to get an unstable pulse in alt color 2, which is deep sky blue, which is a little bit brighter blue. And that will stay active unless I clash 3 times. And then the final level, the rage, is going to be in silver. If I point up and hold for 9 seconds, that will become active. And then the only way to get out of that is clash 5 times. Now, phase 2 and phase 3 are incremented, so phase 1 has to be triggered first, whether or not I use the same trigger. That's what incremented means. You'll see it here. So if you set up incremented, and even if you set different phase triggers, you can't call the next phase until the one before it is active. So we're going to go through this. Now I'm going to just kind of demo it all out on the editor. You can mess around with the controls. So point up and hold. I'm going to point up and hold for 3 seconds. And we're going to get our rolling pulse active. I'm going to parallel my blade. So if you leave it up for 6 seconds, I'm going to jump at the next one. But now, so this is my phase 1. And now if I clash twice, it's going to revert to my blue blade. Now the difference in color, like I said, Dodger blue, kind of close to blue. But now let's go hold this up for 6 seconds. It'll jump from 1. So phase 0, there's phase 1. A couple more seconds. There's phase 2. All right, I'm going to go back to parallel. So that's my unstable pulse, and that one's in deep sky blue. Now this one can only be reverted if I clash 3 times. Or lockup. So if you do a lockup, it's the same as a clash. There's my revert to 0. Now the final phase. So the idea of this, like, you're building up energy in your blade. So many different animes use this. But anyway, you can set up these incremental triggers where if you have this action, point up and hold, or any of the gestures you want, and you do it subsequently, you'll keep building up power, which is what I'm doing both in the representation of the animation, the color, and then the revert. It takes more to revert back. So the idea is I've built up this extra power into my saber as I've held it up. And then when I go to use it, if I've built up to this case phase 3, it takes it longer to revert back. And you could set timings, etc. But so let's go hold this one up for 9 seconds, and it's going to go through our phases. So phase 1, here's my first build up. Phase 2 is going to be a little more power, and now we're going to get into phase 3, and there's phase 3. Now, I have no subsequent phases, so I don't have to return to parallel because there's nowhere for this to go, but you can. I mean, obviously you wouldn't be holding your blade straight up the whole time for more than this, but if you do, it doesn't have anywhere to go. That's the other thing with the increments, is they actually stack on top of each other. So if I hit the last phase, there's nowhere to go. And in this case, I don't have any other trigger. So I'm going to be in this phase now until I clash or lock up 5 times, which is what we set over here. So I'll do a clash, do a lockup, release the lockup, do another clash, still in my silver, do another clash, still in my silver, last clash now, and then I'm going to revert back. So if you imagine as you're using this, you can stack a few more phases on top of it. To me, this kind of covers what I want to accomplish. You can mess around with all the triggers, colors, etc. But this idea now is I've built up all of this power in my saber, and I'm going to use that power, and it's stronger. And that's why when I went to these revert triggers, I made it so that the first one's relatively easy to disperse, the second one a little harder, and then the third one's the hardest. You can also mess with all these. You don't have to use class. You can use any of these triggers, and they can be independent of each other. It's whatever story you want to tell with these multi-phase. That's kind of how I picture a lot of this stuff. Is I usually have like this story for what is happening with my saber, and then I build out a style to kind of support that. Obviously, again, you need alt fonts with these. I have a collection of fonts just from doing this for a while. I make my own. There are vendors out there, font makers, who have built out, but I have a separate video on alt fonts. There's also tons of documentation. You want to have, the minimum is you need to have the alt folder with something in it. That's an alt. You don't have to have a full-blown font in each alt folder, which I know some people think, but you need a sound at a minimum with an alt setup to support this. If you're missing it, none of the phases beyond 0 are technically achievable, because this whole special ability concept leverages what we can do with alt fonts. So it's all kind of what makes it possible. So you do need to do that setup, but there's so much documentation that I have videos all. So I keep talking about it, but it's on the library up top. So this one is definitely very, very recommended to watch. All of these, in my opinion, are recommended. That's why they say it. But particularly if you're trying to accomplish something and you're stuck, first watch these videos. I put the time in to make them because I already know the questions that are going to come. If you watch the videos, please watch them first. But if you watch the videos and you still can't figure it out, that's what this link here is for. This is for, I have a question or something's not working. And that something can be not working in the library, which does happen. Sometimes some of the controls conflict with each other. Sometimes I have a typo in a script. If the library's not doing what you want it to do, report it to me as well. Try to be as descriptive as possible. If you get style code from the library and you get a compile error, same thing. Use this link. Or if you just can't get started and you've watched the videos, again, please watch the videos first. Post on this link. Everything, any questions, any issues, post on the link. I do ask for you early access members. I know I've said this on a few different videos. If you're getting compile errors or style code is not working and you're using the early access library, I just need the top section of style code. That's the style information. So if you go here, that's what starts with this copyright comment, and then it ends here. This section, and this will be completely different depending on what you built, this is all I need to debug the early access library. The stuff that I've set aside to be early access is, a lot of it has taken me so long to develop and it is so advanced. That's why it's in early access. But that section, first of all, needs to stay with your style code or you really won't be able to use the styles. You won't be able to set up for them. But secondly, it provides me all the information I need to figure out if something's not working properly. So I do ask, if you have a problem with compiling, if you have an issue where the style is not working like you want it to, post that top section in this link. That's all I need to do my debugging. I don't need the actual style code to debug or to figure out what's going on with your setup. And it's just because I've put some of these really advanced features in the early access library. I don't want them necessarily rolling out to the public. They're kind of set aside for you early access members. So the style information at the top is what lets me help you out. The bulk of my features are now public, but there's a couple like this brand new gesture thing and a few other ones that are still only early access. They will remain early access for the foreseeable future. So if you, safest thing is if you generate code from the early access library, just give me that style information block and I can help you from there. So much more in this new gesture special abilities. Like I said, I'm going to try to shoot a couple other videos to go through all the other setups we can do, but I wanted to cover this one, and then I've got a couple more planned, so I will be rolling these out over time. The feature is, by the time you see this video, the feature will have been released. So I'm building the library of videos first to support it, and then I will publish so that you guys have access to it. But that's it for now. Keep an eye out for the other videos. Definitely check. They'll be added to this recommended group. And I hope you enjoy.